Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History Spiritual Quest. We're finishing off chapter 13 of the book of John today, fourth book of the New Testament, and we're headed into chapter 13 of the Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner. Both were texts that Elvis loved, and he tried to bridge them together so that he could bridge through to further spiritual readings and so that he could reach people who were outside of the circle of the faith that he grew up in and try to bring them into the sheepfold. And we're going to look at all that when we come back from this song. Hi, Gunn. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you both here. This is Word on Fire.
Gold letters on the spine.
thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear those echoes out of the book of John as we finish our walk through chapter 13. Let's take a look at All Equations at a Glance, which is Joseph Benner distilled into my words in equations, verbal equations that we can grasp with ease, at least some ease, and carry into the text. And we can look for these things to see if there is resonance between what Joseph Benner has been telling us and what the book of John tells us, the Bible. Let's look at the second from the bottom on the second column. It says unity equals the true state equals I am God equals love equals heaven equals eternity. It's all of these concepts wrapped into one. It's the same way, it's a different way to say the same thing as the fourth down in the first column, which says I am God equals all time, space, place, presence equals love is in all things. Now, why do we care about what Joseph Benner has to say, and why would we want to distill it into equations? It's because this is the framework that Elvis was using to look at all the other spiritual texts. Books like The Prophet, which he already loved, but spoke in a poetical language, and which he could use to reach a certain group of people. And he's able to identify the resonance in the prophet that has always spoken to him and that he's trying to communicate forward. And that's what he focuses his annotations around. So that all, sprang originally from the book of John, or the Bible in general for Elvis. At a very young age, he described it to Red in a phone call as the age of 2, that he was reading scripture or that he had some kind of relationship with the Lord. At 2, he probably wasn't reading it himself. It was being read to him, but he was incorporating pieces of it. And then he finds those pieces in these other books. And Joseph Benner, he's like a set of stereo instructions, universal stereo instructions, that then Elvis can take and apply to all these other texts and thoughts and beliefs. And he can show that underneath everything, there is unity. And that unity is truly love. And that's what Elvis would project when he was on stage singing, what he was trying to project through his recordings of I would say at least after the return to the stage in 1969. It's always implicit in the recordings prior, and there were the gospel recordings that he did before. So it's been a thread and an undercurrent and the love underneath everything that he's done. He just becomes much more conscious about it in his second outing as a singer and not a movie star. So let's slip into the spiritual text itself. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We're at verse 27, and Jesus and the others, I believe they're at the Last Supper. And Jesus has told them all that in some way they've turned their heel to him. And that's basically saying that they have not accepted 100% everything that he said. That some of them continue to have doubt. That some of them don't find alignment as easy as others do. And then he points out that he's really pointing out that in their hearts, each of them has the capacity to betray him. That they could go further than just not accepting something that he said, and that the turning the heel is something that's a little further, and it's really not that much further just to slip all the way into a full turn into misalignment, is the way that Joseph Benner would describe it. And then as they begin to question themselves, and Peter asks Jesus who it is, hoping that it's not him. But Jesus has pointed out it could be any of them. They are all poised to be a betrayer. And so he's also showing that whoever he's going to point out, that person deserves compassion. And that's what Jesus is giving to this person, is compassion. Then he identifies that it's Judas. And he does that by saying, I'm going to put this piece of bread in water. They're calling this a sop. And it's going to make it soft. And so this is actually a generosity. It's like washing the feet. It's something that you do because you like somebody else. You try to make this bread easier for them to eat because it's somewhat unedible until it's been sopped. And so this is saying that Jesus, he didn't point out Judas as a condemnation. He pointed out Judas because he knew what would happen. And he's still offering Judas the opportunity to change this, that Judas retains free will. But then in 27, it says, after the sop, Satan entered into him. It's got this capital S, and we've seen devils before with a small d. And so in terms of Joseph Benner, this is something like the devils are a pattern of misalignment. They are what we could think of as fog. But the fog could be many different types of fog. It could be a smoke, it could be a fog, it could be a mist. Each one of those might be a different type of interference with the I am. It's caused by a different layer of your personality. And when the capital S comes in and it says Satan, Joseph Benner would reference that as referring to a specific layer of the personality that solidifies, becomes completely opaque. This is the direct and singular cause of the misalignment. Now, there's a lot that can be added to that to help the misalignment, but there's some specific thing. In Judas's case, it probably has something to do with money. We've already seen that. But for others, it would be something else. But it's not the devils in general. It's not the pattern. It's the specific inside the pattern. This is one exact example of the pattern. And it's that exact example which cages Judas's divine shard in this moment. Because Judas is a divine shard. We are all divine shards. And when Jesus offers him the softened bread, this is Jesus recognizing and weeping for the divine shard. He aches for Judas because Judas's personality is interfering with their communion. And Jesus knows that the divine shard wants to commune. But this thing has gotten in the way, and that is Satan. But it's something that's being created, according to Joseph Benner, inside us. We may have brought it in from an external source, but it's a fog that we're pushing power into by the twisting of the love or the Holy Spirit that is sent to us through the conduit of our divine shard. And in this verse, Jesus tells Judas, that thou doest, do quickly. And so Jesus is saying, I recognize that this fracture in yourself, which you've been spiraling, which keeps you from me, has now intensified and is a full crisis at this moment. And that in this moment you are now panicked, you are frightened, and you have completely turned from me. So go and do what you have to do, so that I think this is Jesus telling him, so that you can return to me as quickly as possible, because we know that a turn into misalignment can also be a return to alignment. It's not a forever state. Alignment doesn't last forever, and neither does misalignment. It's a cycle. This is just going to be a particularly terrible cycle, and Judas is gonna... He's probably not going to return in this plane of existence. But at every moment, he does have the opportunity, because we experience time sequentially, and in each of those discrete packets of time, Judas gets to make his decision over and over and over. And in verse 28, now no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him. So the people at the table do not live in the divine now. They live in the moment, in the present. They remember the past. They imagine the future, but they don't know the future. Jesus knows it all because he's in the divine now, which is every moment wrapped into a single point. That's unity. That's what we think of as eternity, which is actually a concept outside of time. We would think of eternity as forever, or some time period that is longer than we can imagine. Something like the way that we can't imagine how large the universe really is. However, the universe is finite, and time is a construct of our own minds. Eternity is the word that we really are trying to use to describe the divine now, which is a place outside of time that never ends. Everything that we know ends, and therefore it's very difficult for us to truly conceive of a place or anything that does not end. But if we go back up and we look at verse 27, and where Jesus tells Judas that thou doest, do quickly, and we look for a resonance in Elvis's life, we all just went through that phone call from Red West. The phone call Elvis makes to Red West, and that's recorded. And it feels like that's the message that Elvis is giving Red through the whole thing. Red starts to talk about, I'm going to print this book. And Elvis basically ends the conversation and hangs up. But he does it very graciously. And he continues to pretend that he can't hear Red, that he doesn't hear Red saying that I'm going to betray you. He just tells him to do what he's got to do, which is a shortened form of do it quickly. And Red does it very quickly. Now in verse 29, this says, for some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, that Jesus had said unto him, buy those things that we have need of against the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. This verse brings in a bag. I'm assuming that's a bag of money. And the others are assuming that Judas has this bag, which must be communal property of some sort. I'm guessing that means the others don't have any money with them. They're not working, really. They were fishermen, or they did other things, but now they're following Jesus, and I'm assuming that doesn't come with a paycheck. So it could be that Judas is handling all the money. And they assume that Jesus trusts Judas to handle the money. That's why he's given it to him. Because they would need food for this supper that they're at, this feast. And then they're thinking Judas is supposed to give the rest to the poor, whatever hasn't been spent. They're living these thoughts that the Lord will provide somehow as they move forward. Judas is carrying a bag of money, but the others aren't. So the others are living this thought, but Judas, even if he is in the pretense that he doesn't have any money, is carrying a bag of money somewhat like a security blanket. And Jesus has already indicated in an earlier passage where Judas has questioned Jesus about money that Judas may have an issue with money himself. This is his particular Satan. And it appears that Jesus has not given Judas the money because he trusts Judas with the money, but because Judas requires the money in order to reveal what is keeping him from Jesus. That Jesus is indicating to Judas, this is your issue. I see it clearly. Do you see it clearly? He's not shaming Judas in front of the others. The others believe he's trusted with the money. And obviously he is. He's got the money. This makes you wonder, though. Now, Elvis was not Jesus, and Jesus was not Elvis. But we're given the example of Jesus's life because we see the resonance of everybody's life in Jesus. Just as we can see the resonance of Jesus in everybody's life. It's difficult with some, but you can see it there. And this makes me wonder, when Elvis gave money to people, when he gave them expensive gifts, when he gave them beautiful jewelry, when he gave them what they coveted, Was he providing the same lesson that Jesus was providing to Judas by having Judas carry the money? Were the guys that carried his money, was that part of a lesson that he was teaching every day in the same way? Elvis rarely carried his own money in the 70s. He had it in like a black box in a wallet. And then somebody carried the black box, which had a whole bunch of other stuff in it. Now, Riley, his granddaughter, showed that box on the Oprah show, and the first thing she pulled out of it was a Bible. A well-worn, much-read Bible. Probably with annotations and underlines that we've never been able to see. But it's interesting that he kept his money with his Bible, and they were both with him, but they were carried by another, in the same way that Jesus had somebody else carrying the bag of money. And maybe that's another lesson. Jesus wasn't tempted by money, but there could be a lesson here that if you can divorce yourself at least one step from the money, because money is somewhat of a universal temptation, it'd be a larger lesson that if you could separate yourself from whatever your temptation is by one step, that it will be easier to resist the temptation. But there's another lesson implied that to overcome the temptation completely or spiritually, I don't know if that would mean secularly as well. I think there's a confusion that when things happen spiritually, they mirror in the secular world, but that's not really true. But I think there's another lesson here that to overcome your temptation spiritually, you must carry them. It's all here. It's all in the verse. It's just in these various layers of it. Gunn says that she doesn't think so, that she believes Elvis gave because he felt good doing that, and it just gave him a good feeling. That's entirely possible, too. Many people did comment that it appeared to them that Elvis found great joy in giving the money. And that's not a resonance with Jesus, because I don't know that we see Jesus feel great joy in teaching a lot of the lessons that he does. He does occasionally, but I don't think that he's showing any joy in this one. And in verse 30, it says, he then, having received the sop, went immediately out, and it was night. I think this is a comment about shame. At least Joseph Benner might look at this as shame. Judas immediately turns his back and walks out the door. You have to turn your back to walk out the door. And he's walking away. He's geographically removing himself from Jesus. He walks into the night, which is darkness. He leaves the light. Jesus is the light. He moves away from the light into the darkness. Joseph Benner would describe this as shifting from alignment into misalignment. And in this case, it's nearly a 180-degree shift on the compass. It's been a while since I talked about the compass, but north is alignment. Everything else is misalignment to some degree or another, and we could dissect each degree and figure, where does willful, true misalignment that is broadcasting misalignment to others, where does all that begin? Well, in this case, Judas is basically turning fully south. This is a direct walk away, somewhat like Adam and Eve when they left Eden. Now later, they do pivot and they realign. They never are able to return to the Garden of Eden, but they do find their alignment. But in this case, Judas is walking south, straight away into the darkness, into his own solitude, is another way that Joseph Benner would put it. And in verse 31, therefore, when he was gone out, Jesus said, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. So this seems like a difficult passage to understand. It says, therefore, when Judas left, Jesus then said that the Son of Man is glorified, who is Jesus, and God is glorified in him. The Son of Man might be Judas, but then it would be hard to understand what glorified means. But it could be an affirmation that within Judas is a divine shard, and that divine shard has gone forth to serve God's will, even though this is not what Jesus wants. That this is part of the plan, that Judas is part of the real earth, which is what Joseph Benner calls the great project that we're all here for, which I've likened to a giant painting the size of the universe, that we all play our part either consciously or unconsciously, willfully or not willfully, that all paths eventually lead to the fulfillment of God's will. That's the giant canvas. Each of us are going to put our part on it. It's best if we do it consciously. But even if we turn away and walk into our own solitude, as Judas has done, Judas is going to play a very important part, maybe the most important part, next to the sacrifice of Jesus himself for the saving of all mankind, all humanity. That the great painting can't be finished without this personality interference that has occurred within Judas. Judas has fractured. And that's not something to be glorified, but it brings the project that much closer to completion. But that's a really hard lesson to understand, because Judas has to really suffer for this. And some could say that Judas deserves it, that he wanted it, that he chose it. But Jesus knows that he chose it because Judas could not see or hear Jesus clearly, even though they were both physically together. And Elizabeth says that she thinks Jesus grieved and was heartbroken, even though he knew it would happen, that someone he trusted and loved betrays him, of course. Absolutely. I think he's heartbroken also in the way that a shepherd who knows that he's got this one sheep that is just really stubborn and always runs right to the ravine and falls in and is going to one day break his leg doing it, that he has to let the sheep run free from the sheep pen every day. And this one just keeps running to the ravine. And there is no way to stop it. You can't keep him in the sheep pen all the time. And of course it's heartbreaking, but in this case, it's for a greater purpose. And gun saying equals visible. Let me go back up. And I think you're talking about the darkness of the night. But I'm not sure. But Elizabeth says that she never thought of it that way before, that Judas is one of the biggest factors in saving man by forgiving. Right, Judas has to play this part. Somebody had to do this. And Judas wasn't chosen in the sense that this was his fate. Judas had a particular personality flaw that made him vulnerable to this fate. But it was all internal within him, and it was all an action of his free will. But I don't believe that we see Jesus condemn Judas here. And Gunn says that she believes that Jesus must have felt sorrow when given Judas the money, knowing what would happen. And Gunn says glorified equals visible. Well, that's interesting, yeah. Now the Son of Man, now Judas is visible, and God is visible within him. Well, that makes it a very beautiful reading. That makes a lot more sense. It's a hard to understand thing still, but to me, that makes it easier to make the transition to the thought that Judas is a divine shard. And then verse 32 says, if God can be seen in him, it says glorified. So let's read it the way it says first, and then we're going to come back with visible. It says, if God be glorified in him, God shall also glorify him in himself, and shall straightway glorify him. See, glorify to me, it has this connotation of worship. And worshiping Judas or any man, that starts to feel strange when it's coming out of the Bible. But if we say, if God be visible in him, God shall also be visible him. God shall also see him in himself, and shall straightway see him. If God be visible in him, God shall also see God in himself. Or God shall also see Judas in himself, in God's self, and shall straightway glorify Judas. I don't know. It's all hard to figure out, right? I don't know what Joseph Benner would have said here. I think it's all about reflections of the divine shard and the divine, but the exact pathways have lost me. But it's some kind of reaffirmation that God is in Judas and Judas is in God and that there is unity. It's just not clear to me. And Gunn says see equals be aware of. Yeah, be aware could also. If God be visible in him, God shall also be aware of him in himself and shall straightway be aware of him. Yeah, it's about a visibility to God. That part doesn't make a massive amount of sense to me because we're all visible to God, right? So it's got to be something about us being able to see. But let's move forward. Maybe it clarifies. It says, little children, yet a little while I am with you. Ye shall seek me, and as I said unto the Jews, whither I go, ye cannot come, so now I say to you. So Jesus refers to the disciples as little children. Now, my guess is he just said these two very confusing things. We just saw Judas walk out into the darkness. We've fractured the discipleship from 12 to 11. This is a big thing. These 12 have been together the whole time. And now they've learned that one is a traitor. And as we have spiraled through many layers of what that means, I'm sure most of them are in the first or second spiral, and they're thinking about traitor. And it hurts, and it's an emotionally traumatic event right now. And Jesus keeps saying something about how he's not going to be around soon. He keeps hinting about something, and then he says these two confusing things about God and glorification and somehow connected to Judas. And yet they just saw Judas was a traitor. And then he calls them little children, which I think is Jesus acknowledging that I just said very many confusing things that I'm not going to explain right now, and that your mind's going to circle around for long after I'm gone. And there is meaning there, but it doesn't need to be explicit to you in this moment. What does need to be explicit is I'm only here for a little while longer. That's why I'm shoving all of this dense material into these short lessons, which make no sense at the moment. And that ye shall seek me, you will spiral around what I've said. That's the seeking. And as I said unto the Jews, now he's also with seek, meaning the Romans are going to take him, and the disciples are literally going to come looking for him. But then he says, as I said unto the Jews, whither I go, ye cannot come. So now I say to you. So he's already told his own people, the Jewish people, that if you're not aligned, you can't follow Jesus. And at this moment, their religious teachings, although they come from a tradition of alignment, they have an overlay that is currently making them misaligned. These are the teachings about what he was saying at the temple, about how he had to throw the moneymakers out of the temple, about how the Pharisees can't seem to come to terms with what he's saying, about how they keep throwing up laws instead of what the scripture is supposed to accomplish. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Mark says that Judas simply did what Jesus God told him to do. There is that also. Jesus clearly told him to do what he needed to do quickly. And Elizabeth says, I believe that the disciples who have been together for a long period of time felt hurt that one of them was going to betray, which was beyond their understanding. Exactly. This is an intense emotional moment. And it's being overlaid with lessons and confusing words. But then also a tenderness about little children. They're his children. That he sees that they are trying to follow what he's saying. And then he says, a new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. So he gives a very simple commandment. I've said confusing things. Let me also add this very simple statement. Love one another. Now there's a massive amount of depth and complexity to this statement, but at the surface level, it's very easy to understand and carry with you. As I have loved you, love one another. Follow my example. See what I have modeled for you. Reference the model and try to emulate it. And that breaks down to love, because Jesus is love and all things are love. All things are unity. And in 35, by this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love to one another. So Jesus has told them that the mission is to go forth and tell people, basically to shine the light. And now he's giving them very specific instructions for how to shine that light. Love one another. I think that's what what we could distill Elvis's religious thought down to, if we had to take it down to a single phrase: love one another. And that you will be recognized by the love that you have for another. And that's what he projected on stage. And Gunn says, couldn't Jesus have asked Judas not to? He could have. He could have also cleared whatever the personality issue is that Judas had. And by personality, I'm always referring to the mask of personality that we wear that Joseph Benner talks about. It's a fog to our communion with the I am in our hearts, but it's a necessary and vital thing, a gift to us here on the earthly plane. So he could have done that, but if he had, the great painting would never be completed correctly. That this is part of a plan that's beyond our understanding, but that Judas was not misused. Judas played the part that he wished to play, but it's a part that Jesus would have spared him from if Judas had chosen to be spared from it. That's the tragedy of the whole thing. But it's something to do with how the divine shards experience life here on earth. It's part of the project. And Jesus knows that it's a temporary thing, because ultimately all will be reunited in unity. That's what he's told us. And Gunn says, and Elvis could have asked Red not to write the book. Elvis could have. Instead, Elvis said, I'm trusting you, Red. And he left it at that. And then Red went forward and he took the actions that he took. Hi, Lorna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So you could say that Elvis emulated Jesus in that decision not to ask Red to not write the book. Now, Red, I think he wanted Elvis to ask him not to write the book. Now, Elvis had made offers. I don't know how those offers were worded. They came through intermediaries. But the offers, the way that I saw them, and we'll look at them someday, but we don't have a lot of information about them because they're really people talking about them, but they were more off-ramps for the guys. Hey, it's not that I'm asking you not to write it. It's that you know it's the wrong thing to do. I understand that you got wrapped up in it. I understand you signed things. I understand there are legal issues involved now. And this is the off-ramp. I'm giving you a way out. It's not that I'm asking you not to do it. I'm saying by now, I know you've returned to alignment and you know you're doing the wrong thing. And I know you can't get out of it by yourself. So here's how you can do that. I think they felt they could force Elvis into actions, and he didn't take any of those actions. The same way that people tried to force Jesus into actions, and he always blazed his own trail. He could not be contained by the trappings of the others. And that's not to say, again, that Jesus is Elvis or Elvis is Jesus, but there is a resonance there. And in verse 36, Simon Peter said unto him, Lord, whither goest thou? Simon, they've just lost Judas, and now Jesus says, I'm going somewhere and you can't come with me. And so Simon immediately says, no, we're all going. Where are you going? And Jesus answers, whither I go, thou canst not follow me now, but thou shalt follow me afterwards. I believe this is a reference to unity or eternity, as we've talked about, heaven, as many people say. And Peter said unto him, Lord, why cannot I follow thee now? I will lay down my life for thy sake. Peter's in a lot of emotional turmoil in this chapter. He's basically begged Jesus to tell him he's not the one that's going to betray him. He's been part of this fracture that Judas is now gone, and Peter's understanding that his own discernment is now in question because he didn't see this coming. He didn't see it in Judas. He's now been hit with this thing that the Lord's going to abandon him, and that's the way he's taking it. I'm being abandoned, and I'm not going to abandon you, so I am going. This is the turning the heel again. Jesus just said, you're not going to be able to follow me, and you're not going to follow me until later. You'll come later. And then Peter immediately turns the heel and says, no, I'm not accepting what you've said, which is what Jesus had pointed out earlier in the chapter, that you guys don't accept everything I say, that you struggle against a lot of what I've been trying to tell you. And Peter plays that out right here. And Jesus answered him, wilt thou lay down thy life for my sake? Verily, verily, I say unto thee, the cock shall not crow till thou hast denied me thrice. And so Jesus again shows that he lives in the divine now. He knows what will happen. He's not cursing Peter. He's not trapping Peter. Peter has free will, but he's just stating what's going to happen. And that he's also recognizing the emotional intensity that Peter feels in the moment. Wilt thou lay down thy life for my sake? And Peter is absolutely sincere. If they had burst in at this moment, Peter would have fought the Romans. He would have taken a sword for Jesus. There's no doubt of that. But he's hyped up at this moment. And we never stay in the same emotional state all the time. And there's going to come a moment and he's going to deny 3 times. And that's the end of the chapter. We've brought Peter to the moment of his own internal crisis. And he's having a hard time accepting it. And Gunn says that she wishes that Elvis would have just asked Red not to write the book. I wonder what would have happened if he had. I mean, that's what they wanted. So what would have happened then? But I don't know. Maybe it would have got through to him. And Elizabeth said that Elvis had so much compassion and that there's definitely a lot of commonality between Elvis and Jesus because of the compassion. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. We've again not gotten a chance to go through the other stuff I brought for today, but we made it all the way through the chapter, and it was very a coherent walk, so I think that was important. But just for fun, in this last few moments, I'll flip through some of the things I've got prepared for the future that we're going to be able to take a look at. Some of them we've seen before, but there's still new stuff coming. And we'll look at that in a future episode. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. I truly appreciate it. Lorna's asking if I've seen Epic. I have not. I live far away from the theaters, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it while it's in the theater, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. And Gunn says thrice. Is that the word used today? Yeah, that would be 3 times today. Although we do refer to Edie Hand as Elvis's first cousin, thrice removed. Although most people in America today would say third cousin. But that's an interesting note or connection to the word thrice. I want to play a song to send us out of here. Thank you all so much. You all keep on taking care of business. This is Quiet Light.
Beauty walks soft as a whisper, yet thunders like storms overhead. Kind and gentle in its passing, still a thing of might and dread. And the word became a lantern, placed in trembling human hands, saying, child, behold my glory, not in faces, but in hearts that understand. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every wanderer is called home. He wrote truth in quiet margins for the ones who read between. Faith will conquer. Beauty's not the mask we're wearing, not the mirrors feeding grace. Beauty burns within the heart space, kindness casting God's own shadow on the contours of a face. And the I am speaks in stillness, in the breath between each thought. The soul remembers union with the love it never lost. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every wanderer is called home. He wrote truth in quiet margins for the ones who read between. Faith will conquer, said the giver. I am the light you've always seen. Distance only closes in the moment, when the veil of flesh is torn. Yet the word says I am with you from the instant you are born. Dreams stay cold, room silent, body, mind and spirit still as one. In that hush the lantern brightens, and the night becomes undone. Be as gentle as the lamb is when you're dealing out your love. Be as fearless as the lion when you guard what's holy from above. Let your honor strike like lightning, swift and righteous in its speed. For the light that lives within you is the strength behind the creed. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. Every soul receives a lantern, every seeker finds the one. He wrote truth in quiet margins as a gift for those in need. Faith will conquer, said the giver. Walk in light and you are free. And the I am whispers softly as the lantern warms your hand.